Welcome to The Real Recovery Show. We air every Friday at noon, and we're super excited about all the feedback we've been getting. We have such a wide variety of topics and shows, and now in our, I think we've recorded about 20, 21, 22 recordings so far, and they're all up on themeetingspace.com. You just click on The Real Recovery Show. And what we like to do is we like to talk about recovery from a deeper and more broad aspect. So what would one think normally would be just recovery from a particular substance or a particular behavior. But as anyone who's been in recovery long enough finds out, that as you go deeper, you find that it's not the alcohol, it's not the drugs, it's not the food, it's not the behavior, it's the thinking. It's the thinking, and then it's the question of who are we really and what is this really for? And we go deeper and deeper. And some of us, even in our addiction, we're seeking those answers to those questions. I know I was. And well into heavy drug use, I was seeking and praying and meditating and trying to find what resonated with me, to have some sort of answers as to why I was so distressed. But well into recovery, we find as we go deeper and deeper that it was never the drug, it was never the substance, it was never the other person, it was never the job, and it was never the health issue. It was really a much deeper thing, that our thoughts create our experience, and it was our thoughts alone, our interpretation of our environment, and our story of who we think we're supposed to be, that really truly was the it that made us feel uncomfortable in our own skin. And while we were chasing things in the world and trying to change the outer world to make the inner world feel more stable, sane, peaceful, comfortable, etc., we thought that it was because of what we believed we were experiencing in this world that was making our experience so bad that, of course, if you had this experience, which we would regurgitate over and over and over again to anyone who would listen, that you would be so needing a drink too. And, I was no different. This is definitely my experience. I believed from the earliest age that I shouldn't be here, and had a childhood that seemed to affirm that. My parents being in addiction and having their own inner distress and trauma, but also not knowing something that I learned much later was that what I was seeing, what I was attached to, what I was focusing on was all a self-fulfilling story, embracing, issue-building, problem-focused perspective. I would take hostages. I would have relationships and friendships where I would tell them my whole sob story of my horrible abusive childhood or my health issues, or later on, some of the things that happened, the rapes, the losing that, the this person treating me this way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I would go and I would have relationship after relationship, looking for somebody to get me to feel peace, and changing the things that they did, et cetera. And what an amazing journey to get to a place at this point in my recovery and in my life to recognize that I told myself stories and I believed them and I lived my life as if they were true. And in that illusion, I was super disconnected from who I really am, and very much basing my serenity and my sanity on things that are very temporary and transitional and could be completely erratic. What other people think, how much money's in the bank, what I look like, what kind of attention I'm getting, what kind of anything. You could fill it your own life, right? So, the coolest thing that happens to a person like me is that everything seems to crash. They say that when you're in recovery that the alcohol stops working, the drugs stop numbing, the people, they're just many different faces, but it's the same person. And you get to a place where you bottom, you stop digging, and you get to a place where you're like, you know what? There has to be another way of seeing this. And so we do something, and it starts off focused on changing the job or stopping using the substance or whatever. But as we're invited to find out, why is it that we thought this way? Where are these resentments coming from? Why are we basing our serenity on all this stuff? And we start to practice more positive solution-oriented thinking protocols. We end up finding more and more freedom, even if nothing outside of us seems to change. Oftentimes, a lot of it does change because we're less attracted to the same stuff, and we are less attractive to the same people that would bring that, and we just don't feel the need to do it anymore. It just becomes very neutral, not something to be pushed against and hated, and not something to be any more veneered or worshipped, but just neutral, like, oh God, I remember when I was so involved in all that. And so that whole concept in the process of awakening, whether it's an addiction or an affliction or it's a whole thought, relationship, interpersonal issue of codependency, it all comes from the same place. And to focus on the similarities and not the differences is one of the biggest, most important pieces of advice for anyone walking through their own recovery, whether they go to a 12-step program or anything. And so, I'm really super grateful that the life that I had, I now see completely differently. The childhood that I felt ashamed of or was fodder for, a lot of poor me's, or it was something I manipulated with to get people to do stuff for me, or something I used to rationalize and justify using drugs or eating or whatever I was doing. It becomes retranslated, and question marks get put on the end of all these beliefs of what I think my world's supposed to be. And while I felt so completely out of my mind, not knowing what it was that I was supposed to believe in or anything, this childhood, this experience, this path that I thought was, oh my God, what a waste, and how I went through all that was actually the best, funny I should say, boot camp for me to go through, to be able to think outside of the proverbial box, for me to be able to question everything, for me to not hold to any one belief system, because there were so many conflicting belief systems within even my own home. And so I invite you to join us today. We have Timber Hawkeye with us. He is the best-selling author of Buddhist Boot Camp, which is a book actually that I have seen over at the meeting space. Different 12-step programs have been using it. It's not an official book for their 12-step program, but sometimes people will vote it in to their meeting because the meeting's autonomous and can do that. And then Faithfully Religionless, which is his memoir, right? And The Opposite of Namaste, which is his latest book, right? And his books and the Buddhist Boot Camp podcast offer a secular mindfulness practice to be at peace with the world, both within and around us. His intention is to awaken, enlighten, enrich, and inspire. And so today he's on the show with us, and tomorrow he's going to be at the meeting space from 1 o'clock to 2:30 in room 103, and we're going to have a meet and greet with him, and he's going to do a Q&A and a discussion, and he'll be there to sign books, etc. And we also have autographed books of all 3 of his books at the Recovery Store. And so at this point, I'm just going to turn the mic over to him and let him share about how his journey began with all of this, and then we're just going to have a conversation wherever we feel moved to do.
Thank you. When you were speaking, I kept visualizing what you were describing was a path, your life path, your career path, your recovery path. And when we think of a path, I tend to think of an area in the forest like a hiking trail, an area from which all obstacles have been removed. And at some point, you look around and you're on a path and you realize this isn't my path. It was there, and if I stay on it, it can only lead me to where the person who took it before me ended up. And if I don't want to end up there, I need if you find yourself in the hole, the first thing to do is stop digging. And for me, it was there were many different ones, but the career path was a big one. I was a paralegal for 10 years, and one day one of the other paralegals was celebrating her 30-year anniversary at the firm. And the fact that she celebrated 30 years in a cubicle terrified me, because I got to see this is where the path leads. And it was much more than just the corporate job. It was the condo and the sports car and the designer clothes and the furniture and everything that I was on this path to be what I thought was just the all-American kid, whatever that looked like. And I was mimicking and masking and just pretending to be something I'm not, until one day that became scarier because I knew where it was going to lead than the unknown. And so for me, I didn't necessarily hit rock bottom. I just got a glimpse of where this path was leading, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew right there and then what I didn't want. And I think knowing what you don't want is an equally helpful navigation tool. And it navigated me away from the conventional path and onto my own. And it was intentionally just to live a simple and uncomplicated life at first, but then it requires you to look at yourself and go, why did I make these decisions that complicated my life when what I really want is a simple life? And so just like you were saying earlier, we developed these belief systems, and I started asking myself, every time a thought came up, I would pause and go, according to whom? And being told, don't believe everything you think, was a big game changer for me, because they're not my thoughts. Even when I think they're my own, they've been accumulated over the years from teachers, preachers, society. And just asking according to whom helped me pause. And mindfulness is that pause between impulse and response. And as soon as I introduced that pause, it changed how I respond to life. And that which used to be appealing lost its appeal. It's incredible. And other doors opened, and I just walked through them. And if it wasn't it, I said, okay, this isn't it either. And I just kept going and treating life like an experiment without any attachment to an outcome, and just saying, let's see what's behind that door. It's very liberating and makes life very exciting, because you don't have a script of how it should be. Right. And if you study NVC, nonviolent communication, the word should is the most hostile word in our language. We're constantly shoulding all of our other people. We're shoulding all of ourselves. So just raising awareness to how often we think the word should and how much judgment is behind it based on whom, I don't know. It's not relevant, but it's definitely not according to my grounding truth.
That's so interesting and so true. I feel like when I was a little girl, I had this awareness that I wasn't this body, and that this wasn't real. And then I also had, it's very dualistic, right? So I had this other idea that I didn't feel like I fit in, and I felt like I saw through all of the games and the social norms, and this person has to wear this outfit. And I grew up in Dix Hills, Long Island, which is like upper middle class, and so a lot of your worth was based on whether or not you had real Keds with the actual Ked logo on the back, or Cavariccis, and I don't know, it is what it was. And I just I wouldn't say, so I had this spiritual awareness as a child, but I also had this confusion, because I had this heavy weighted, who am I in this world and how am I supposed to fit in? And so I truly believe that even though I had this experience, I was sitting outside Forest Park Elementary School and I was by myself, and I spent a lot of my childhood by myself, but this intuition came over me and said, don't buy into any of this. This isn't real. And yet, even though I had gotten that admonition, even though I had that, I desperately wanted to feel close and part of. And the reason I'm saying this is because when we go through this awakening process, as we all have to, ask more questions and go within and release more and unlearn and unlearn and unlearn, we get to why we were even wanting to take on these beliefs in the first place, right? Whether it was, I had a story about how my parents shouldn't have been this way, my mom shouldn't have been this way, my dad shouldn't have been this way, and so I would compare it to other people's parents, which I don't really know. I just had stories about them. I don't really know how they were. But then I would also compare it to the shows I saw on TV too, and I was desperate to have some sort of understanding about something that really isn't understandable, because to understand it, it's all perception, and so whatever position you take will give you a different story about it, and it is dizzying and stressful.
Especially to a child. Yeah.
If you're looking for your identity in the world and you're taking on all the beliefs that you're telling yourself you're seeing and other people are telling you, you'll have a lot of work later to do to unlearn. But we miss the idea of oneness that we truly experience on a soul level. And so as we identify with our ego, we very much try to create that in the world and to feel like we belong in the world. And so we have all of these ideas. And so your journey about going through and having the experiment of wanting freedom, wanting peace, wanting simplicity, recognizing that something's not resonating for you, waking up to that it's really not resonating for you, not the story of who you think you're supposed to be, but really not resonating with you, is you being true to yourself, and in so doing, tapping into what we all have that some of us are not listening to because we're still identified and we still not fully, nobody ever fully buys into the ego, but enough buying into the story of who we think we're supposed to be to have what we think we're supposed to have. And yeah,
everything behave the way we're supposed to, and again, according to whom, and then there's rules, and we don't want to break the rules because we don't want to be the bad girl, the bad boy. We want to get recognition, we want to feel like we belong. And when I set out to dedicate my life to studying what people believe and why we believe what we do, and not just religion, but your prejudices, where did you pick them up, but more importantly, why are you still carrying them, to a point where I don't care what people believe, because your beliefs don't make you a better person. Your behavior does. So when we talk about this inner knowing, this the feeling of alignment or versus out of alignment, it's not because you're not following the 10 Commandments or some precepts that were handed down to you by someone else. The example I always use, while I'm on tour, I stop to get some snacks for the road, and I'm in the grocery store and I grab a bag of mixed nuts, and I keep, pushing the cart down, and I get to the produce section and I find a bag of pistachios, and I go, ooh, yay, pistachios. So I grab the bag of pistachios, and then I pause for a moment and I look at that bag of mixed nuts, and I think to myself, what do I do now with this bag of mixed nuts? Because I'm not going to get it now that I'm going to get the pistachios. So do I put it just where the pistachios were? Because that's not where they go. Or do I do what's quote unquote inconvenient and then go back to the aisle where I got the mixed nuts and do that? And I realized at some point in my younger years, I would have just left it wherever and thought to myself, shoot, someone gets paid to take care of that. It's not my problem. And I would just leave and have no internal conflict about it. But at some point in that moment, I looked at it and I said, it's going to be inconvenient to go back to that aisle, but it'll be more inconvenient to go home knowing that I didn't put it back where it was. And so that's the inner knowing that has nothing to do with someone giving you a set of rules. This isn't illegal. No one's gonna ever know. It's not about anyone else. It's just internally to feel at peace with the world. It's the only way we can ever get to a point where we can live at peace with others.
Absolutely.
And not blaming other people for how we feel. It was a huge, I mean, much like you, I grew up in a very violent household, and the violence wasn't the worst of it. It was inconsistent. And the inconsistency of it made home a very scary place to come back to, because I didn't know if I was going to get a hug or a beating. And so I was always on edge, and I was scared to go to school because I was bullied at school, and I blamed everyone else for how I felt.
Oh, interesting. I was too.
Yeah. And the problem is, again, like you, I grew up watching a lot of TVs because you think that's, and I grew up watching Who's the Boss with Tony Danza and Alyssa Milano.
How old are you?
45.
Oh, okay, so you're 6 years behind me.
And in Who's the Boss, you know,
Right.
it didn't matter how angry
Right.
Tony got at Alyssa. By the end of the show, he would go into her room and he would apologize, and she would apologize for being a brat, and it would end well. So I remember being in my room and crying, and not from the beating, but just waiting for my parents to come in and apologize for what they did. And this whole notion of waiting for the same person who hurt me to come back and comfort me, for the same person who caused the pain to come back and console me. Even at school, when you get bullied, the teacher grabs the bully by the ear and says, now you need to apologize to him. So we grow up blaming other people for how we feel, and then going to those same people who hurt us for comfort. And it's just this vicious cycle of waiting for someone else to liberate us when it's our job to liberate ourselves. And the moment I realized that, I flipped from being in my room and trying to commit suicide or come up with ways to kill my mother and get away with it.
Oh my God, so similar.
Right? And then one day I realized I don't need to kill myself or her. What needs to die is this emotional attachment to her. What needs to die is this need for her to approve of me.
Right.
And once that's gone, I'm free. Not only am I free, she's free.
Right.
She no longer has to play the role of how I thought a mother, quote unquote, should be. Because there are no shoulds. There's no script that she needs to follow according to whom? According to me, of course. So she was freed, I was freed, and it was the first of many steps to liberation.
I went through that too.
Yeah.
So in my life, I was trying to be my mom's therapist. I kept thinking that if I fixed her, then she could be my mother, and that all would be right. And so, and it was so, and it set the tone for me doing it with so many other people in my life. And so finally I was guided that I was supposed to, now this may sound harsh, but stay with me. I was supposed to fire my mother from being my mother and take her back as another person who is walking through life, who has addiction, who has recovery, who has whatever balance of whatever, not for me to know, but to see her as just her own path, her own journey, and not somebody that's supposed to show up a certain way for me. Yeah. And that gave me the impetus to not be the person having to show up to fix her. And so in the beginning, I told her this. I felt guided to actually tell her this, and I told her the why, and she accepted it, which was so amazing. And then I said, so when we talk on the phone, you're not allowed to complain to me, because if you complain to me, I will want to fix it. And then I will start giving you advice. I don't know why I have to be your mother, but I was never supposed to be. I'm not saying you wanted me to be, but I'm just telling you that that's how this has turned out. This dance that we do, we automatically do. And then I end up hanging up the phone super frustrated, wondering why I got on the phone. So this is what we need to do. And it happened pretty quickly in the grand scheme of things, because from my memory, it was, I think, maybe just a few times where it would slip or something like that. And I would gently remind her that we can't do that. That's now a boundary of our interacting. And if you want me in your life, this is how we have to be. And this was at least 22 years ago or something. I don't remember, 20 years ago. And to this day, I always question, am I calling her because she is my mother, or am I calling her because I feel to? And to not have any kinds of conversations. And it's so normal for us now to just appreciate each other's existence and to check in every now and then and say hello to each other. And it doesn't have any of the whatever. I'm even careful to not share too much if I have something coming up to heal or anything like that. Because in the past she's been very she would project stuff and I might be vulnerable. And I don't want to be in a headspace. I need to be detached from that. So that's very fascinating. What you were saying earlier reminds me of that story about the two monks walking down the road, and there was a big puddle. And so somebody was a big, huge puddle, and this person needed to cross the road. And so one stopped, picked up the woman and carried her off over the puddle so she wouldn't have to walk through it. And then they continued on walking. And then the other monk said, I just have to ask you, like, what was that back there? We're not supposed to be, because of what have you, we're not supposed to be picking up people and whatever like that. And he said, well, I let her down miles ago, but you're still carrying her. When you were talking about how, we can keep all this, the story about whether or not I even put the cart back or I put the mixed nuts back in the place, is it something that really resonates with me to do or not? Because if it doesn't resonate with me, it will be something that I think over and over and over again. And if you think about when we don't live in what resonates with us in an alignment, can you think of, if you just have one thought that keeps gnawing at you, can you imagine lots of thoughts, and then that becomes your normal, and then you're doing more things that are out of alignment, and your whole life, your inner life becomes where you just feel like you shouldn't, and you don't know why you feel this inherent discord within.
Yeah, an internal conflict. And that's why Gandhi said happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are all in alignment. They're all in harmony, because the alternative is to live in disharmony, not just with one thought, but with everything and everyone, internally and externally, and everything becomes a struggle and a struggle is not a requirement. And just realizing that is very liberating, and it's freeing. And it wasn't just so much as firing your mother, so to speak, from her role, but firing yourself from the one who needs to fix everybody. Yeah. That, I mean, I did a podcast episode called Off Script, where I said, in movies and TV shows, yes, actors have lines to memorize, they have a role to play, and they follow the script, and there's a director, and when they don't follow the script, he yells cut, and everyone has to do it all over again until the director is happy.
Right.
But in real life, there is no script. There's, meaning there is one in your head of how other people, quote unquote, should be, but nobody in your life, not your parents, not your children, not your boss, not your president, not the other driver in the car on the road. No one has agreed to play along with your script, and you are not the director.
Right.
You just showed up on the movie set one day and started telling people what to do and getting upset with them when they don't. So it's really about firing the director within and just saying, have a seat, enjoy the show, let the chips fall where they may, so to speak, and not necessarily let go. There's a lot of talk in Buddhism about letting go, but telling someone who spends their entire life white-knuckled and hanging on to let go is like telling someone who's really stressed out to relax. Relaxed is too far removed from where they are, and letting go is too far removed from where most of us are. So my invitation is to loosen the grip.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily let go, just loosen the grip just a little bit. It's every moment when you feel clenching, just go, how can I loosen the grip a little bit right now? And it just becomes a practice, and that becomes this beautiful practice of just living. It's so peaceful. I don't know how to explain it, because I live in the same world as everybody else. It's not like I don't get cut off on the road. I do, but I don't assign any of that meaning. I know it has nothing to do with me. And that's the difference. I'm still getting cut off, but I don't take it personally.
But you're not attached to being someplace at a certain time necessarily, or for people to not drive that way.
To please the guy driving really fast, or to get to where I need to, or to some narrative like, maybe that happened so that I don't get into a crash later on. I don't get into the narrative and the story, because one of the biggest lessons I learned is the difference between feelings and emotions. And feelings last 45 seconds to a minute and a half. That's it. They come and they go. Somebody cut you off, you get upset. That's fine. That's fair. That's how feeling works. Somebody upset you, you get upset. But then your favorite song comes on the radio 10 seconds later, and you're not upset anymore. You're bebopping in your seat. That's healthy. An emotion is when somebody cuts you off, and instead of moving on to the song, you start writing a story, a narrative. They shouldn't have done that. They shouldn't have cut me off. Someone should pull them over. They should burn in hell. Or it's always those jerks in pickup trucks or BMWs. Or the other day I gave a talk, and some guy said, no, it's the jerks in white Teslas. And it's just like, it was so specific, but the specificity of it is important, because now for probably the rest of his life, every time he sees a white Tesla, even
right?
parked on the side
it's
of the
like
road,
Pavlov.
It
right?
just, his blood pressure goes up because emotional
the Tesla
maturity
is the bell.
it's whatever gets triggered into. So emotions are basically the stories, the narratives we tell ourselves about the feelings, and that emotion can last a lifetime. So emotions are like the potholes on what would otherwise be a very smooth path towards euphoria. If we emotions, meaning the stories we tell ourselves, if we just drop the story, and emotional maturity means not being upset today about something that upset us yesterday. So yes, getting upset, angry, all of that is valid. Every feeling is indicative of a need that is either being met or not being met.
Right. They're like gauges. They tell
and
us
even
when
as a
something's
child,
off.
Of course.
Right. And we just give it all the meaning because we're trying to fix it rather than be in it. I had somebody share something once in one of my classes that was so good for me. He said that when you try to let something go, you can't let it go. But if you see it as nothing, it falls away. And so to find out, what's the attachment, what's the fear behind the thing, and to question it and to not attack it and go, that can't be true then. Just go, you know what? Is this true? Does this resonate with me? What could be the truth instead of this? Very gently. It needs to be a very gentle process because it's just like when you have a talk with somebody and you're trying to be super helpful to them and you think you know what they should be thinking, right? There's that word should. And you tell them like that you're mirroring back to them what they're doing or whatever, and they are not in that headspace, nor did they probably ask, or even if they did, to hear it, they will side with the story. They will dig their heels in more to their belief system, and they will defend against what anybody could be saying because it's theirs. They're very identified with it.
Of course.
And so if we have this story about who we think we are and our whole programming about what the world is for and what we're supposed to be doing by the time we die, don't you know, then everything will be interpreted, the guy in the Tesla, to even somebody doing something you might label as good. It's all going to be interpreted through the filter of these deeper beliefs. And so as long as I try to not feel, good luck with that, but just rather...
all the feelings are valid. Just don't create a story around it. Don't emote. Yeah. Feel it, don't emote it. And that's the big distinction
don't feed
for me.
it. Yeah.
And it's very, very freeing to witness someone who is creating their own anguish and not feel the need to fix them. Because like you said, if they identify with it, even when someone says, I am angry, they're identifying with their anger. That's who they are now. So they're looking at the world through the lens of anger. You can't possibly give them anything to calm down because, again, it's like telling someone who's stressed out to relax. Good luck with that. But when you say, I'm feeling anger right now, as opposed to I am angry, I am angry identifies with the anger. Saying I'm feeling anger right now acknowledges the feeling and the fact that it's temporary. And the work I do with people with PTSD, for example, there are those who identify with their PTSD. So if we show up with coping skills on how to imagine a life without it, like you said, they're going to defend and protect their PTSD because that's now part of who they are.
Absolutely.
And any offer we have of a coping skill is threatening their identity. Of course they will defend and protect it.
That's bringing up core biological reactions of a fear of being killed. Because if you're so identified with your story and somebody is suggesting, that's why I say to be very gentle with this, because if somebody is suggesting that maybe, just maybe, there's something not true about what you're telling yourself, if that's all you believe you are, then you will protect it because
use violence to defend your
and
view,
people do on
100%.
mass scales. And that's really what's going on. One person's belief that they're invested in, even like when each time an election comes up, right? And then you have people go to the different camps and now they hate people in different camps that they may have loved before and threaten disownment or threaten disconnect or whatever. And I could see that we've given everything all the meaning that it has for us. And it's not to say, it's not invalidating anybody's preferences. It's
It's allowing both truths to exist.
It's allowing everybody to have their opinion and their belief, and it's all coming from what they want and what they value and what they fear, and that's their journey and that's their path, and that's their path. There's nothing. It's not good or bad.
There's something very important to them that they're protecting, and when you see that, that's why the new book is called The Opposite of Namaste, because Namaste is typically defined as, the light in me, the God in me, acknowledges the light in you, the divinity in you. And that's really easy to do when you're standing in front of someone who is calm and patient and loving and compassionate and gentle. And you're like, oh, namaste, right? I see the light in you. But what happens when you're standing in front of a jerk, right, who disagrees with everything you say? It's really difficult to then go, namaste, jerk, right? Because it doesn't quite resonate. But I've been a jerk before. I've been short-sighted before. I've been wrong before. I've been self-serving before. So I can look at them and go, I know why you do what you do, because the ego in me sees the ego in you. And that immediately eliminates judgment.
Oh, I love that.
It does. And for as far
back as time. The ego in me sees the ego in you.
Yeah. And it's not something we need to say out loud to them, mind you. It's all internal to just be able to look at them. Please, And that's why even in it's
like, oh, the ego in me sees the ego in you.
That's not going to land well. In the first book, in Buddhist Boot Camp, I said the first principle is that the opposite of what you know is also true. And I made that the first principle because if you can make peace with that the opposite of your truth is equally true to somebody else, somewhere else because of their time, place, and circumstance, everything else becomes easier. Even your own truth 15 years ago, 10, 5, 50, last night may not be true today. So hold on to your truth very lightly. Don't put a capital T on it because all these people who believe that there's a universal truth, it's always conveniently enough their own. So,
and whatever shift in perception you have today, more will be revealed. So if you get so attached to whatever the perception is that you have, as much better as it might have been than any other perception you've had for a really long time, you will inevitably be invited intuitively to question even that, because it's not going to serve you as you go even deeper. More is going to be revealed into where all of these beliefs like a loose garment. So one of the things I found also fascinating is about you is that you also had the same journey of choosing as you were going how you felt right to do in regards to eating, in regards to how you felt about religion, etc. And that the position you took was, I have the same exact perspective. The position you took was an acknowledgement of what is right for you, just like it was an acknowledgement of what was right for me, without any need for anybody to be other than they are. For example, 10 years ago, I went vegan. I had tried to go vegetarian before. I had stories about it, stories about needing animal protein for blah, 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 serotonin, where you're getting your protein, all that stuff, And I have hypoglycemia genetically, and so, and seizures, right? So I was like so terrified of not eating meat because of all the stories that I believed doctors said in society about what I thought I needed to eat to be okay. And it wasn't until finally everything that I did that I thought I was supposed to do and that other people said I should do, right? The stories, running on the stories, that my intuition invited me to clearly look at how it wasn't working, and stop and eat a banana. And so I did, and I got guided to read certain books and to do certain things, and I went vegan overnight, raw vegan, high carb, low fat, raw vegan, and I did it. And I've been various versions of being vegan. But what's interesting is that as soon as now I shared with people that I was vegan, the conversations that would happen were the people who were not vegan feeling threatened by my saying that I'm a vegan because of all their stories about now I'm going to judge them and now I'm going to, not whatever. And then, or their fear stuff around it because maybe part of it resonates and they want to know, but where do you get your protein? And they're so afraid, like I'm going to try to turn them into a vegan, which is quite hilarious. And then the other camp of people who are vegan, some of them coming forth going, oh, so this is great that you are this because we need to go and protest this and do this and whatever. And while there was nothing wrong with anybody in this whole spectrum of, I have been everybody in this spectrum in one way or shape or form, whether I did it outwardly or internally, right? Love animals, rescued all the animals, whatever. I was the person who ate this way, did this, whatever like that. And so I am completely, and there's very few areas I could say this about, but it's awakening process. I am completely without any kind of need for anybody. Even dating, I had this need that the person I dated needed to be vegan and all this other stuff. And then I questioned that too. And I let it all go. And it invites instead a conversation without any attachment to anybody doing anything other than they are, because tomorrow I possibly could be guided intuitively to do something else. And so there is no right or wrong. There's only what's right or wrong for me right now, and what's right or wrong for you right now, what's right or wrong for you right now. And you, not only did you become vegan, but you did it without any need for judgment at all too. And how that is I'll say this last thing, to be vegan for me is to live in alignment with my deeper value. And I feel my energy vibration being much higher. And I just feel like at the end of the day, there is no part of me, kind of like the idea that I didn't put the mixed nuts away, right? There's no part of me that has been really ascribing to overtly creating that suffering, right? So I feel more at peace with that. So if I was to have now stories, right, about how other people should be doing the same thing, what is the difference? I am literally creating disharmony and judgment and toxicity, not only in the lives necessarily that I'm joining with elsewhere, where I'm joining them on that toxic level of people should and shouldn'ts and everything like that, and guilt and shame and fear and judgment and whatever, but I'm not doing the healthy thing for me either. So I could eat super healthy and have toxic thinking and have judgments in my heart and need other people and still base my serenity on other people doing things a certain way, right? And tell myself I have to be the savior of all the whatever, that I could be living in such disharmony. So that's one of the things I just love, how through your process of your awakening, and maybe just egoically because it mirrors my own, but I'll tell on myself. But I do feel that to me is the higher vibration of inclusivity, not exclusivity. Really wanting to live and let live, and encourage everyone. Just one simple thing is to be true to themselves.
Yeah, there's a restaurant in Seattle. Their slogan is "Eat like you give a damn." And I love that they ended the sentence there, meaning they didn't tell you what to give a damn about. Eat like you give a damn about what? Your health, about animals, about the planet? No, just eat like you give a damn, because the alternative is to eat like you don't. And so the vows, the intention was to be more compassionate. Veganism is just a side effect of that. The decision wasn't to be vegan. It was to be more compassionate. It's to do less harm. And so that's just one of many ways in order to do that. And it wasn't even about others. It started with, how can I not treat myself as cruelly as other people have been treating me? And asking myself, if I loved myself, would I eat this? If I loved myself, would I drink this? If I loved myself, would I be dating this person? And those are really tough questions to answer, because the hardest thing for us to see is ourselves. And it's so easy to jump onto some bandwagon and get on this, path of self-righteousness, but it's not about being right or wrong. Like you said, like Rumi said, beyond right and wrong, there's a field. I will meet you there. And so allowing, surrendering, accepting, those are all the opposite of judgment. When as far back as time, singers and songwriters and poets and philosophers have all tried to define love. And I really think the Dalai Lama nailed it. He said, love is the absence of judgment. It's that simple. Love is the absence of judgment. If you think about what is standing between me and being able to love the person in front of me, or even what's between me and being able to love myself, it's judgment. It's always judgment. And when we remove judgment, all that's left is love. And if everything we think, say, and do is a declaration of that love, that's who we are. It's beautiful.
And that's what I feel like is the true meaning and experience of Namaste. I feel like, as ironic as this is, just like the word God has so much meaning given to it, so does the word Namaste, that it gets to a point. In fact, that's just a simple greeting in part of this world, just like hello. And so, but to really focus on, this is truly me being true to myself, and this is my path, and this is the thing that's freed me, and to keep unlearning, and to keep asking, does this resonate, and what feels like the next right step, and what should I say, and what should I do, not from a story from the outside in but from an inside out. It's harmony. And when we come from an inner harmony, and we know why we lose our peace when we disconnect from that consciously and we start running on a story, if we're coming from that space ourselves, then when we see somebody else and they are in their own story and they're telling themselves a scary story and they're believing it, or they are telling themselves a really good story and they're believing it, and they're getting super excited, either way, you start to see the difference between the story and being. And it's important for me to keep seeing that, so that I stay choosing my truth, my inner truth, rather than the truth of my stories, my perspectives and everything like that. But Namaste to me trusts the other person's path.
Yeah, it's the ego in me sees the ego in you, and the God in me loves the whole of you, ego and all.
Yeah.
That's something only the God in me can do, is accept and love all of you. But the ego in me sees the ego in you, and they might even partner up because, you hate the same person I hate. So that creates, now I'm part of a group, and the ego in me loves it because, we're all against the same thing. And that's why, it's so easy for people to join groups. We're all anti this, we're all against that. I'm like, don't tell me what you're against. Tell me what you're for. Right. Promote what you love. Don't bash what you hate. It's easy to, but don't. Just focus on what
that's
you're for.
Harder than people realize. They don't. I remember when I first started overtly in the more focused part of recovery from addiction, and they would say things like gratitude lists and affirmations, and watch the self-talk, because the things you say go into your ear, and you're just reaffirming these toxic things. Like, I'm from New York, and I thought that everybody in New York was sarcastic and self-deprecating in their sarcastic humor, and if somebody else wasn't getting thrown under the bus, they would make themselves the center focus of their own jest. And so I would say things like, oh my God, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I did that. Or, oh God, that's so crazy, I'm so crazy, do you believe that? And oh my God, da, da, da. And we don't even realize the words we're choosing is literally reaffirming. If you lived with somebody that kept talking to you the way that you talk to yourself, would you want to live with them? Mm-hmm. Probably not. Yeah. And yet, like you said, would I eat this if I loved myself? Would I do this if I loved myself? What are the words that I'm choosing? Being impeccable with our words, choosing only to speak that which really feels like it adds to. I even have this thing, my path in form is different from your path in form, in that you've gone more the celibacy route, right? And
after many years of the opposite.
Oh,
yes.
I have had many years of the opposite too, but we very much, so that's where we were very much alike. Mm-hmm. And this is where the form, it's interesting, they're all paths to the same place, right? And but if I join with somebody, always, I don't want any martyring. I don't want anybody doing anything because they think they should. I don't even want somebody having sex with me or doing anything because they think they should perform. I really feel this too, to make sure that I am only doing what resonates with me and allowing people to do only what resonates with them. And in that
not
way,
out of a sense of obligation is what I'm hearing. So it's not obligatory. It's not because they're doing what they think they should according to some script, according to some narrative that was passed down to them. I mean, even with couples, they're like, oh, we need to go to bed together at the same time. And it's like, wait, according to whom?
Right.
And it's probably because their parents used to go to bed
Right.
together at the same time. And it's like, but
Right.
that may have worked for them. What if you're dating someone who's a night person and you're a day person?
Right.
It's like, just, I think of our belief systems like, you know, the Etch-a-Sketch, and we all have this blueprint of how things should be and how people, and I just say, just shake that Etch-a-Sketch, just get back to blank, start with a blank canvas of what works for you, and meaning the couple, the two people, and build your own, you know, foundation. Mm-hmm. Because if you're trying to build on someone else's and you're each bringing a different blueprint, all you're going to do is clash. Mm-hmm. And people bring even arguments about the right way to do laundry, you know, and they start fighting about these things, and it's just toilet paper over or under. It's like, it's these things.
Yeah.
And we believe them, and we believe we are right, and we need to be right by making someone else wrong. We try to make ourselves superior by making someone else inferior. Mm-hmm. And for many of us, the only way people feel good about themselves is by trying to make someone else feel bad. Mm-hmm. But if I am confident with my truth, I don't need to prove it to anybody else. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I'm going to be really honest, the only thing I know for certain is that I don't know anything for certain. Mm-hmm. So I don't argue with anyone about anything. Mm-hmm. I just listen. If somebody tells me the sky is green and I believe it to be blue, I just say, tell me more, you know, and I can walk away from that conversation with a newfound knowledge that to some people, the sky looks green. Mm-hmm. And I can do that because the blueness of my sky is not jeopardized by how green they perceive it to be. Mm-hmm. But if I don't have confidence in my blue sky, I can't stand it if someone doesn't agree with me. I need everyone to take my side.
Absolutely.
Because my own sense of worth is now tied into other people accepting my perception.
Absolutely. I think it's also because a lot of the beliefs that we have are not rooted in our deep belief, in our deep intuitive knowing, right?
No,
so
they're just passed down to us.
We're putting all this energy, right? We're putting all this energy into maintaining these beliefs. This is how it is. This is how it is. And so that's why we need to argue and defend it, because we on some level recognize how fragile our rooting is with these ideas, that somebody could threaten our belief system, God forbid. And so we need to have a good defense and a good argument so that we can keep it. And instead I've learned to where all of my thoughts, we were talking about earlier. So here we have the problem. The problem is we're identified with our thoughts, right? Well, the solution is to detach from them and to see them as just information for me. And so when I see it's a thought, it's a belief, it's just as good as any other belief. The question is only for me is, does it resonate? If it doesn't resonate...
Doesn't resonate right now. Because, I mean, my truth 10 years ago, the walls I put up when I was in a violent environment, those same walls that I put up that protected me, to cling to them now would work against me.
Right.
You know? And so all of those belief systems, I call it BS. It's just beliefs that it's just let go. I think of it like the junk drawer in the kitchen. It's just stuff that's been accumulating over the years. And there's, like you said, gently open that drawer and don't even judge yourself. Why did I pick this up? Why do I believe? It doesn't.
Just information.
It's just, it's there. The only question is, do you still need it now?
Yeah.
Like, that's the only, it may have served a purpose years ago, or it may have just ended up there because you didn't know where else to put it. But now, look at it, go, does this serve me? Does it serve a greater purpose? And if it doesn't, let it go. It's Marie Kondoing your mind, so to speak.
So there's this saying that a man who stands for nothing can fall for anything. And so a lot of times
that would be a man who's desperately trying to find something to stand for.
Well, so from that perspective, so it could have two different interpretations based on we're looking at from the ego side of it or we're looking at from spirit side, right? So the ego side is we need to stand for it. But from the spirit side is to wear everything like a loose garment and to only stand in what resonates in the moment as a yes for us, whatever it is.
I love that you added for us.
For us, because in the moment, and that is very important. It's so funny how when people get into even recovery, or they get a new way of doing anything, that they want to tell everyone and shout it from the rooftops, because they think, oh my God, this thing is so amazing. Oh my God,
this is the way.
And people send me videos all the time, and they
way.
send me books, and you have to read this and you have to do this, and I'm just like, okay, well, I'll see if when that resonates with me, but I can recognize that's really exciting. Your energy is high. You're vibrating high because it's right for you, and I could appreciate that. But just because it's at the right moment, the right message for you in that moment,
doesn't mean it's going to be the right for me.
For me either. Mm-hmm. And the same thing vice versa.
Yeah.
I can't go and go, oh my God, I have the way. Everybody come and I will tell you how to live, because that is not a thing.
Yeah.
I'm on a need-to-know basis.
Taste buds. I think of it a lot like taste buds. The same way, if I find salsa that I really like because it's got a lot of cilantro in it, and I can't tell you got to try this, it's the best thing ever, because you may hate cilantro through no fault of your own. So I look at belief systems the same way I look at cilantro. It's not for everybody. Right. And that's why in the new book, in The Opposite of Namaste, the very first page, before the table of contents, before the copyright page, the very first, it says, trust those who search for the truth. Be very skeptical of anyone who claims to have found it.
I love that.
Because that is a dangerous person if they believe, I know the truth. I'm like, easy, tiger.
Yes.
It's your truth right now. Put a small T on it. Go home.
I had this thing happen years ago where there was a whole discussion going around about who's enlightened. And I saw it, and I was like, uh-oh, I have a feeling this is headed my way. Because I was teaching lots of classes and became ordained and was like, speaking, whatever like that. And the people who were having this dialogue were people in the inner community. So I felt like my intuition was being like, heads up, this is about to happen. And sure as, questions started happening where people were like, are you enlightened? Because so-and-so says you're not enlightened, and blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, wow, what an interesting question. Who would say I'm enlightened? Who would say that? And so I asked my inner guidance, and I said, how am I supposed to see this? And what he did was, because I'm a wordy, and so he took the word, just like with the word belief, I say the word lie is in belief. He took the word enlightened and he wrote in light in me. And it was like, right, when I am tuned in to the light within me, detaching from everything else and allowing my perception to come from that perspective with no need for things to be a certain way or attachments to the results, I am in my enlightened state in that moment. And when I am not, there is a lesson, because everything serves for that purpose of helping to shake up my snow globe, to show me where I still have some snow that needs to be cleared away. And life is in session, class is in session.
As long as you identify as a student, yes, I think that's important. If you identify as a student, everything will be a lesson and everyone will be a teacher.
Right.
The moment you identify as enlightened, you start looking down on everyone and think you have the answers.
And then you lose it. Yeah, it's like having your hands, right? And your hands are open in your enlightened state. You're open and you're allowing. But the moment you say, I've got this, your hands clench close and you've got nothing.
I think it's why my teacher, I know that we need to wrap up, and I want to wrap up with what my teacher said about this very topic about who's enlightened and who's not. Because it's not just a state of being enlightened. He said there are no enlightened people. There's only enlightened activity. So the people we perceive as enlightened, whether it be Jesus or Buddha or the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa or whoever comes to mind, or Lisa Trevino. Right. There are people who made enlightened activity part of their daily lives. It's not just a state of being enlightened or having an enlightened thought. Are your actions conveying an enlightened? And what is enlightened? It's when everything you think, say, and do is in alignment. Yeah. That is, and and it's not a destination.
Yeah.
That's just it, because you can live, and everything you do is in alignment and enlightened, and then you slip, and then that was not enlightened activity.
Right.
But if you make enlightened activity part of your daily life, you may be perceived by others as enlightened, but if you identify as one,
right.
it's under the illusion that you've arrived, as if it's a destination to get to.
Right. And then you're missing the whole point.
100%.
And what's fascinating too is that in the search for freedom, in the search for awakening, that we go and we want to question our thoughts, and we want to detach from the world and not have the religion or the specific belief system or anything into our higher power. But then there's certain books, and then there's certain speakers, and there's certain teachers, and it's so easy to have the temptation to put people on a pedestal and want to believe that they are something extra, mm-hmm. that you yourself don't have the same truth within you. So I think the best teacher that could possibly ever be is one that directs you to your own internal teacher. So thank you so much for joining us, and please do join us at the meeting space tomorrow at 1:00 in room 103, where we're going to have this great event for an hour and a half, and you can come and ask questions and join with us there. The opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them, do not represent any 12-step program, or should replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. And you can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, on Amazon Fire TV. You can listen to us on the PHLV Radio app, or you can get our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeart Radio. And every week we air at noon. And I usually post it on Facebook, but it's always posted on themeetingspace.com. Just click on The Real Recovery Show, and all the episodes are listed there. And please do share it with other people that you feel that maybe you feel intuitively that they might be they might be interested, but don't get attached to the results of them watching it. Anyway, thanks again for joining us. I'm so grateful that you were able to come here and do this before we meet again tomorrow at the meeting space.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today on The Real Recovery Show. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor and gracious host, PHLV Radio, here in Las Vegas. See you next week.